Hi, my name's Erwin, and this is the Poetry Lighthouse podcast. Thank you very much for being here today for the Poetry Lighthouse podcast. Today we have a very special guest. So, Juelz, would you please be able to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and how you discovered poetry?
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. My name is Juelz Davenport. I'm from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I've been writing poetry for years now. But because of it, I've become a author as well as a teaching artist. So I've been able to take my talent and my gift and share it with the youth as well as all walks of life, to be honest with you. And it's been a beautiful journey so far. I've been able to share my poetry and hear other people's poetry and inspire others for the past decade. So I have four published books right now, and the first book it's titled In My Eyes, Urban Poetry, and it's a series. It's meant to be a three-book series, but we're on the second, In My Eyes 1 and In My Eyes 2. I also have a children's book titled In My Little Eyes. And I also just released my latest poetry book, penned in Pennsylvania. And I have a novel coming out. But as far as poetry, that is what I've accomplished up to this point.
Fantastic. That sounds really amazing, and congratulations on these accomplishments. It's wonderful. What does these titles mean to you? I mean, you mentioned "In My Eyes," "In My Little Eyes," and the third poem. And what does this title? What do these titles, in a way, uh, how do they explore what you are looking um, to portray in your poetry?
That's a good question. Well, the title of the first series that I put out is In My Eyes. And the reason I titled the book series that is because it's just basically a reflection of life that I lived up to that point. Also, the experiences and encounters I would run into with others around me, friends, family, acquaintance. Uh, and I pretty much just reflected through my eyes and my eyes. That was the only thing. It was the most uh, striking thing that came to my mind was in my eyes. I think that when you're a writer, you have like a theme you kind of want to capture. It's kind of hard to capture it with just like a one title. So it was hard, but I think in my eyes pretty much is a good reflection of what I write about.
Yeah, it's very true. It's quite difficult to come up with a title that really encapsulates the whole spirit of a collection, but that was a really beautiful title. Um, so you mentioned as well that you do some workshops and you're into the education system, you try to help kids explore poetry. Would you talk a little bit more about it?
Yes, I would. I first started out at an elementary school in my city. It's called Marshall Elementary, and it was really my first encounter with like sharing my poetry with the youth and teaching them with lessons. And I was brought in by a mentor at the time. His name is Nathaniel Gatson. Actually, he's the former poet laureate of Harrisburg. I didn't know that at the time, but I had the opportunity to work with him, and I guess I kind of got a bug for it. So it was like I really liked the interactions. I really liked um, what I seen it do for the students I would share it with. Because when we're coming up, one of the hardest things to do is express yourself because you're kind of still at the point of trying to figure out who you are. And, I think poetry, I was able to see that poetry could really help in that area. So my poetry really reflects some harder parts of life as well as some softer parts of life. So I think the mixture, the comparison, the contrast, it makes for a really good collection for the students to really be able to sink their teeth into. So they're not just getting, I feel like they're not just getting one part of me. I feel like I was able to express lots of parts of me that create, the energy that comes within my eyes. And so far, a lot of students, I've spoken to a lot, I have the privilege of speaking to lots, and I want to speak to lots more. I haven't had a group of students that haven't been able to relate, and that comes from the city, the urban life, all the way out to rural country. I've been all over the place, and I've been able to, and like I told you, I've been doing it for a decade, so had the privilege of being able to see it on all different levels, and it's been true up to this point that no matter where it goes, it's relatable, and I'm thankful for that. That's not and no bragging. I'm just like, dag, that's what I've been able to see from putting the poetry out there. I'm sure a lot of poets feel the same.
Yeah, I think that's a really great mission, especially when it comes to young people, for them to discover that writing can be liberating in a way. And it's very interesting that you mention how you bring your experience as a poet and the way it enabled you to tap into yourself and into the beauty of life and also the sorrows and the pain,
Hmm.
and to transform all those feelings and all those emotions into something that you can share with other people. Once you put it on paper, it's much easier to share it with a greater audience, or just the simple fact or the simple act of, you know, putting something on paper can be a psychological um, way of, helping you through life. So I think that's a really good thing that you are doing. Do you have any kind of special memory of you doing these workshops that really stood out for you?
Well, I just had a recently. I mean, I have a few. That's a good question. I have a few, but the most recent was this young girl from Philadelphia, which is about an hour and a half away from here. I was doing a workshop with an organization called the Mighty Writers, and I had the opportunity to share my society workshop. Usually, I do it with like a much older crowd, but this was more of a mixed crowd. So I was kind of um, not scared. I didn't know. I just didn't know how it would fit in because it was just a variety of students. But I was confident that we would still be able to make it work, and we did, and it came out great. So there was this young girl. She had to be about 10, 10, 11 maybe, and she's like, she's like, Mr. Jules. She says, um, wow, she said, do you ever write about power and purpose? And it was just, just coming, this was after we had interacted a little bit, and we were a little like we were like half hour into the workshop, and I was just like, I don't know, it really wasn't so much about me. It was just like her mind frame, I would say, and the fact that I noticed her paying attention to everything. So there's students when I go to the workshops, they're just there because they got to be there, and then they still participate. But it's a lot different when there's a student where like this is something that they love. You could tell it's something they love. She said, because all I see it's like power and people. And she just wanted to know if I ever write about power and purpose. And I was like, that's a good question. In a way, I do. I said, but I never wrote anything specifically about power and purpose. So I think I will now. you know, and it's something that's been lingering in my mind, so I know I'll get to it. But there's another situation. Well, it was another workshop that I ran in Hershey. I don't know if well, Hershey. Are you familiar with Hershey chocolate?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Hershey, it's the town is literally half hour away from me. So I did a workshop with the school out there, and it was about middle school aged kids, and we did the Words Have Power presentation because I do a presentation about my life, but I also mix the poetry into it. So it takes like an hour, and we were able to do a work. We were able to do that. So then we broke down into groups to do the actual workshops, and then we broke off for lunch. So I wanted to eat with the teachers, but I kept telling them I'd rather eat with the students. So, I just like to interact with them. So they take me to the cafeteria, and And I'll never forget it. You know, they just looked at me as soon as I walked in. They all started saying the same because I say words have power. Words have power. Words have power. So they start doing that. Then next thing you know, one of them came to like show me some love, like dap me up. Then the rest of them just came and rushed me till I almost fell down to the ground. And I was just like, yo, this is crazy. I was just, trying to stand up, and the teachers were like, this is kind of why we didn't want you to eat with them. We wanted to separate it because of it. But I didn't have no problem with it because they were just showing love for real. They liked the poetry, right? They could relate. So it was like, it was good to see that. That was like, I'll never forget
Uh,
that.
that sounds very rewarding. That the fact that you are, being impactful and you're changing their lives, and the way that they see you, they're able to see what you do for them and what your soul. You're kind of putting your soul out there with your poetry and doing these workshops. And I think people might be very, very grateful to have you. Um, Lovely experiences. That sounds like a really very cute sort of. Meeting with the students. Yeah. Well, so I've noticed that a lot of the poetry deal with, social injustice and loads of topics that are not necessarily political, but that, bring a lot of discussion within our society. What would you say are the main, let's say, injustices that you are most driven to speak in your poems?
I would say that's a very good question. I would say systemic racism is like really it's been really prevalent in my life, even as a child, up until this point. So I think a lot of poems that are not a lot, like the ones that I do, where you like we'll cover these types of topics that I really focus on systemic racism because I mean, if I've been impacted in this way, and I'm just one person, imagine how many others have been impacted, and I also speak a lot about I speak a lot about not just injustice. I speak a lot about love, but I think systemic racism is one of the topics I really try to cover. I can't like that's a really a main one for me, so I'm gonna stick with that for that question because
Yeah, that's
it's real.
great. It really has a strong, powerful tone. Most of your poems have this strong activist tone of voice that enables you to connect with all the injustices that pertain to the cause that you are vouching for. Um, Also, I wonder if you have had any poem that you wrote that you were scared to share because of how raw it was.
Uh, that's a really good question too. Let me think on that. I would say. Actually, the more personal ones, because most of the times, the ones I don't want to share, people love them more than the ones that I want to share. So, and that's usually, I think, how that goes. So, I think there's a poem, and I can't think of the title where kind of speak on my daughter, my relationship with my daughter, and it's kind of hard to read. You know what I mean? Because it kind of unlike like a storyline or like fiction storyline, like when you read poetry, I don't know about other poets, but I go back to the moment, you know what I mean? And then even it doesn't change if I'm in front of a group of people or not, because it's like in my mind everything gets quiet and I can just only hear every single word. It's like, you know what I mean? So and then everybody else, once you tune back in, everybody else then heard your most personal, vulnerable moments. So I think um I'm never scared to say what's right. If like getting back to the root of your question. No, I just had a situation where I kind of did that. I had a performance at a community event and there was like some politicians there, some senators and stuff. And then we have relations. So coming and going relationships, I'll call them. And some of my poetry, it really I visibly can notice that it may, I wouldn't say bother, but you know how we can all like put a mask on, and certain situations happen where whether you got the mask on and you think you're prepared or not, when certain words hit you, it makes you uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And if you have interactions with certain people, and you and that person or you and those people know the interactions, and then you may say something, a blanketed statement, and they think you're talking about them. So I had a situation where I had some powerful people sitting in front of me, and I performed one of the poems I'm going to speak to. I'm going to perform or read today, and it's called "Walk Through the Capitol." And it's not like trying to, you know, um, it's just it's the truth. Whatever it's meant to do, however it lands and however it's taken, I guess I have to take it. But my whole goal isn't to just single people out, and that's not my goal. You know what I mean? Because that's not what it's about. It's about truth and change, and it's about like serving the people. You know what I mean? So when I may walk through the Capitol, it's like, and you'll hear it. It's like a little frustration, but not hate. It's like I feel like people are allowed to be frustrated with the things that are going on if they don't agree with them. You know what I mean? And not everybody's down to play the circus role, and not everybody's down to just like act like things aren't going on. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of my poetry makes people uneasy in that way. That these are a lot of the feelings that you feel, but I'm going to say it. You know what I'm saying? So, and, and is it uncomfortable? Not for me. I live with I live with the words. Now
Yeah.
maybe to them it is, and I seen that, and I thought it was kind of funny. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. We don't. We just write and we put it out there. How it gets taken is it's not up to us. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No,
So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's quite interesting to see how sometimes people prefer or are more, you know, it sticks to them poems that in which you feel more vulnerable and you kind of don't want to share them. And those are the poems that kind of ring the most and are the most impactful for people. And I think
Mhm.
there's this sensibility that we all crave for connection. So with these poems, you're able to connect with people, and I think that's one of the points is to unsettle us in a way to make us feel something. So it's not always a pleasant feeling what we end up feeling when we read a poem, but sometimes it's unsettling. Sometimes it's in order to provoke a certain action, certain train of thought. So I think that means your poems are doing great. They are succeeding in what they were meant to do. So no, that's fantastic. And with that, I think it would be a great introduction into your poems. So if you would like, we have three poems for you to read. So the first one you will read, it's called My Society, right?
Yeah, that comes from this book right here. I don't know if it's blurry or not. It looks blurry. Oh, there
There
it
you go.
goes. It does. And my eyes one. It's a little janky. But these are all on Amazon.com as well. And the poem I'm going to read is called My Society. And this has become a poem that I use as an introduction to connect with all the audiences that I speak to. So the way that I usually do it is if I'm in you know, if I have a crowd that I'm speaking to, no matter if it's 5 people or 500 people, I always tell them when I point the mic at you, I want you to say with me in my society. And I like to do that because it kind of gives you the sense of community. We're all in this room together. The topics that I'm about to discuss are all the things that we're going through. So, and then in a blanketed way. So I'm going to share it with you. Obviously, we're not in the auditorium, but I just wanted you to get the vibe of this poem. It's more of an introduction to the vibe of my poetry. So it goes like this. In my society, there's choices of destruction and variety. I always felt like the rules never applied to me. In my society, the path to success is rarely taken, and the young boys lose their fathers and they feel forsaken. In my society, precious young girls evolve to whores, and all we see is closed doors because the open is crowded. In my society, some days I ask God how He could allow this. But I guess He wouldn't give us one thing that we couldn't handle, caught up in our lifestyles in the midst of a scandal. In my society, it isn't safe to walk the streets. There's robbers and thieves, the underachieved. Money's the only subject. People's eyes filled with greed in my society. That poem is my society from my first book, In My Eyes, Urban Poetry 1. So that was my society. What'd you think?
Wow, that was very powerful. I really like the repetition, the anaphora. When you repeat in my society, it sort of goes back to the same idea of, you know, picturing, imagining this kind of specific societal um, community in which, you know, you kind of feel a bit secluded from the other. You know, it feels like there is a group, an in group and an out group in this
Ah,
poem. And I think this is kind of going there. It sounds like it's kind of defending and speaking for the in group that you're in. And I think it's really interesting. There's this line that you mentioned in your poem, which is the young boys lose their fathers and feel forsaken. You know, it really hits hard because you're bringing something that's very personal to something that might be, you know, similar to other people's situations when it comes to, you know, losing a parental image, for example, or being separated. And these are things that a lot of young people might go through. So I think it's also very raw and poignant to, uh, you know, these lines that it's not just um, encapsulating all humans, but specifically this community that you're talking about, your society and my society. So, what do you, how would you interpret, what was your intention behind this repetition of in my society? How would you explain this in your workshops?
well, usually in the workshops, we would, I would have the participants, give me a reflection of their society, but we would start by um, me introducing the poem and them participating in the poem with me. Uh, and the way that I kind of introduce it is, you know, uh, when I wrote the poem, it was over 10 years ago, and life and society and life were different. You know what I mean? It's 2025 now. And a lot of things are the same, but a lot of things are different. So the way that I instruct them is I guide them and tell them to give us a perspective of what they're going through now. Since when I was, we listen to my society, and you can feel this, the things that that are relatable to you. You know, that hasn't changed. But what are the things that you're going through today that, with the technology, with the COVID, things like COVID and just all types of things that are going on, all of these transitions and changes, bring us into your world, bring us into your society. And then at the end, let's share and see how compare and contrast our societies together. And we usually end up taking lines from each poem in the same way that we do the poem with me and my society together. We each state our line, and then we in my society and to the next person in my society. So it's always a community. It's like bringing them into my world is about understanding, and then you bringing me into your world, it's about understanding, and then us sharing it together, it's about like bringing all that to the table. All right, this is what we need to work on, and we're already starting right now by even talking about it, because words have power in that way. Words don't always have power if there's no action behind them, but if we're all in the same room, and like one workshop I did in Franklin County, it's like a different demographic, but we still did my society. They don't do it. It's funny. There's a lot of similarities and a lot of things that aren't the same. So it's funny, how much uh, each community has in common. You know what I mean? But we don't always share it together. So I feel like my society does that for people, and they've expressed that. You know what I mean? So I'm happy for that because that's what I want. It's like a lot of the problems in the world are lack of communication, lack of wanting to communicate, and then lack of like taking the time to understand each other. I feel like, and I'm not saying that that eliminates all problems, but just think about it. If you're mad all day and you're walking around, you're mad because something happened to you. Nobody knows why you're mad. They just see you walking around with this frown on your face, and you're walking, and your energy is just saying everything. And but then you come, maybe you cross paths with a person you feel comfortable expressing that to, and it's like a big burden off of your back. And the next thing you know, you can be yourself again. You know what I mean? Because nobody could have helped you because you kept it in the whole time. You know what I mean? So it's like I feel like poetry does that for me and others that don't, that don't feel comfortable speaking in front of others. I've learned to be comfortable just saying however I feel, and if it don't come out proper, that's on me. But I think a lot of people don't understand. It's just about communicating how you feel so people can understand it. It's not always about you saying all these words, these great words, and knowing every definition. It's not about that. It's about being able to take what's in here and confidently express it to the next person so that if you're angry, they're not angry. You know what I mean? So when you come at them and you express your anger, you can't always just yell. You have like this, you got to be able to articulate things, and I think that's what poetry does for me. I feel a lot of times in my life misunderstood because the way that I communicate is different. A lot of people go through trauma. A lot of people go through things that they don't share, and and it affects the way you deal with people. So I think that my poetry and a lot of trauma in a lot of different communities for a lot of different reasons. So I think that my poetry is always open to anybody that's willing to receive it. It's not, oh, it's all black poetry, or this is just strictly for males. Yeah, I target people that are going through the things, but all people are going through these things. We're just not talking about it. And we're just like, you know what I mean? It's like everything's so separate. And I just feel like my poetry, like something like my society, is a good way to bring people together. And then, once again, like I said, there's many stages of change, but it all begins with coming together, talking about it, putting things on the table. So I think my society does that.
That is an incredible way of explaining it, and it's just so beautiful how you create this sort of connection with your readers, and how that's the main goal, right? To create some common ground and to sympathize with people and see how related we are, and that our experiences can also shape and help other people to go through whatever they're going through, because we're all, in a way, we have our sorrows and our good moments. And I think the way, for example, the way you work with the students in the workshops you do, it's just incredible that you are asking them to be part of the poem, to
Hmm.
to read it together, to discuss together, to really incarnate or kind of instill this emotions and these experiences. It's just fascinating. I really like that what you said about poetry not being this kind of box that you can fit certain themes and certain people, but rather something that you can share and everybody can connect with. I really like that. Very, very nice. I think it's wonderful, and this poem really brings you in. It's kind of like, you know, you're jumping inside of the society you're mentioning, and we become part of it, and we sort of share this same pain, because you mentioned in the first one this the choices of destruction, that we all do sometimes, in one way or another.
Yeah.
The path of success rarely taken. The young boys lose their fathers, as well. Tapping on the issue of you know people being separated from their families or from their loved ones,
Hmm.
which is really hard. And in the third one, the third stanza, I think it's really interesting that you drive this kind of um, you know discussion of God or religion, and how a lot of people might say, why, if there's if God is, so great, why is he allowing so much pain in the world? And this questioning kind of, you know, you say, I guess he wouldn't give us the one thing that we couldn't handle. So I think it's very interesting how you bring this philosophical questionings that we sometimes ask ourselves into the poem, because and I would like to ask you what does faith or how does spirituality shape the way you process these injustices in this society? How do you kind of fit religion into this?
That's an excellent question. Hmm. Well, I just think that everything that I've been through in life, and I know I'm not the only one. I think life is about mind, body, and soul. So um, you can't have one without the other. So I'm not big on organized religion, and I don't bash nobody for whatever they believe in. But I just always have my own walk with my higher power, however, we call it whatever we call it. And I just think when it comes to my life and even what I'm doing today, I don't think it's a coincidence when I look at how my life unfolded and even like I grew up without my dad, so that's why that's one of the reasons I mentioned that in that poem. And it's like, but that doesn't deter you from growing up and having your own special walk with the higher power. Because I don't think that the higher power or God, however you want to put it, I don't think that it was meant for us to not go through pain or for it to not be any chaos or for it to not. I think that if it was that way, then how could we, even appreciate anything. So it's like in my life, and my life to me is hard, but there's people that got it 30,000 times harder. So I'm just, I can only speak from my perspective. And it's like in my life and the things that I've had to overcome and continue to have to overcome, I never blame God for it. I have my conversations with him. And I think perfect timing. There's a kid, I don't want to Umkar from Philadelphia. He wrote this beautiful poem. Uh, he had been written it, but he was in the My Society workshop. And he had written this line that I say all the time, like, and this is just brings back to what we were saying before. Like you wrote the poem, but it's not even yours for real. It's meant to be shared. So the kid, he's inspired by, the work that I was doing in there, but he was one of the most quiet ones, but he was truly a writer. You know what I mean? Like I was telling you before, there's some kids that are just they're there for the entertainment aspect, and then there's some kids that there's not a lot of spaces for writers, so they're sucking this in. They're like, wow, And I noticed him; he was very quiet, but I know he was paying attention. But him and his parents were there, and they at the end they wanted to share a poem that Umkar wrote. He was talking about his relationship with God and how it's not like the same way that I was thinking and like how I look at it, he looked at it. We never even exchanged this conversation. So he's like, it's like the way he put it was beautiful. Hold up, I have to find it. Um, but the way that he put it was just beautiful. So let me see if I can just because I don't want to waste too much time. So he said basically his walk with God is like it's just like like walking with a brother or something like that. Some we might argue, we might fight or whatever like that. You like literally like your conversation with God ain't ain't always you on your knees. Oh my God. You know what I mean? It's sometimes just like talking through the day. Nobody's there, nobody knows, and you're just having. And it's not. And when you have a relationship with somebody, think about it. Even your girlfriend, your mom, anybody, you always come into the moments where they might not be so you don't might not be feeling them right now. You're like, I don't want to talk to, you might be getting on my nerves or whatever. They do something that you don't like, but that don't mean that the relationship stops. So he's like basically comparing like a normal relationship, like the way you would meet, like me, if me and you met and we built a relationship, that's how he views his relationship with God. Like it ain't always peaches and cream, but everybody makes it like you're only down on your knees, please don't let this happen. But it's just like basically the way that I look at it is kind of like how the student looks at it is it's a real relationship. Sometimes I'm not even feeling him or her, whatever it is. And I just feel like, alone or I want to be left alone. Then you realize you're like, then you have it's a conversation thing. I don't know how to really put it into words, but he did in that poem, and I'll share it with you on through email so you can see it. But I don't really know how to explain it. But the kid was able to take how his poem was able to capture everything I felt about my relationship with God, and I think it's just really just a conversation. It ain't always asking for anything. It's just a conversation, a relationship. It's up and down. So that's how. And then when it comes to my poetry, just to tie everything back in, my poetry is just an extension of that. My relationship with God. So if you notice in my poetry, I'm always referencing, prayer, God, my not so much religion, but just the relationship. The relationship that you build till you die with God. You're going back to see him one day, maybe, hopefully, right? So that's how I would put that. I don't know if it makes
Yeah.
sense, but that's
No,
how it just came out
absolutely. I think
naturally.
I think I got definitely the gist of it, and also, the way your student kind of phrased it as well, which yeah, it's very interesting, the different ways in which we conceive religion and the way it affects us in so many different ways, and how we approach it can, also affect the way we act and the way we think about ourselves and life. It's just so interesting because a lot of people, when something happens, is like, oh God, why would you allow this to happen? As
Mhm.
it just you put in your poem. Some days I ask God how he could allow this. But then you start reflecting, well, maybe it's part of it. Maybe life comes with it. And it's intentionally, uh, these challenges are kind of brought to us intentionally for us to grow and get through it and discover something about ourselves. And I think it's quite an interesting point of view. And the end of the poem also kind of wraps up the whole thing in a little bit of a, I would say, maybe political, um, perhaps thought, in which you say, um, there's robbers and thieves, the underachieved, uh, and the money is the only subject people's eyes filled with greed. So I think that quote is really interesting as well, and I can see why a lot of people in the room when you were performing this poem were a bit kind of feeling a bit attacked. But yeah, I think it's quite true. I mean, we can all, I would say, agree with that.
Mhm.
It is just the way our society is working, and it's what took us to, you know, as we are right now, and in the society we are in right now. So yeah, it's uncomfortable sometimes to express the truth, but I think poetry is one of the best ways to actually put out there, even if it's uncomfortable, the truth. So thank you so much for sharing this poem. It was beautiful. There's lots of conversations that can come out of one single poem. We can literally talk about a poem for an entire day, but it's no, it's great. I love that. Thank you for listening to the Poetry Lighthouse. If you liked this episode, don't forget to share and subscribe to our podcast. You can also visit our website, thepoetrylighthouse.com, where you can read and submit your works of poetry and short stories. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram to keep updated. This is the end of the episode. Thanks again, and see you next time.